I think academia is a great place. Sometimes people might get what I say wrong. Again, the empirical fields are perhaps at the height that they've ever been. The problem that we get into with academia these days is when you have, some English professor, a comparative literature professor who specializes in the deconstruction of Harry Potter literature, telling us what we should do about politics.
Yeah.
That's where we get into trouble.
Professor of political science, and the guy who says, "Oh, you had that professor? He's crazy. Yeah, he's that right-wing anarchist guy who tells liberals to go f*** himself, right?" Tonight is an important night. Exactly. Endangerment of freedom of speech is no joke, and it's something that we see in the academy and on college campuses and in increasing intensity. What are the origins of this endangerment? It goes back decades. It goes back to the general acceptance by academia of liberalism or progressivism or whatever you want to call it. The notion that everyone and all cultures are somehow equal. And if we criticize or say, well, we think that some cultures are better than others, or some ideas are better than others, then we're called all the names in the book, right? So I have a few solutions that I hope that some of you will take with you. There's a new movement emerging, right? Milo perhaps is the unofficial or official spokesman of this movement. It's been deemed the alt-right by some, whatever you want to call it. But I have some solutions for us to take forward. As this movement develops and as our outcome goals emerge, we should ask questions. Now, take the lefties and say, explain economics to me. They'll go straight to something else because none of them understand economics. So that's a good starting point. What is economics? And explain the economy to me or something like that. Don't be afraid to be politically incorrect, right? That's what this is all about. Break a rule now and then. It feels good. And for those of you on campus, vis-a-vis the parking services, run wild. Now, people call me an anarchist. I don't know if I accept that moniker or not, but I do accept the notion of anarchy as praxis. Not necessarily as outcome, but as praxis. What does that mean? That means be a thorn in the f***ing bureaucrat's side, right? Government is never the solution. As Ronald Reagan said, it is always the problem. So think of anarchy as praxis. I'll leave you with this. This is something that some of you know about me, but I always say this to those who matter to me most. Be free, be the best version of yourself, and resist all those f***tard liberals who tell you otherwise.
How long have you been at LSU for?
This is the beginning of a second year.
Okay,
so last fall.
So do you have tenure then?
No, I'm tenure track.
Oh, okay, no, because to say the things that you said, I was like, wow, he must be really secure with tenure because that's
I rely on my publishing record.
Okay.
If they want to deny me tenure with my publishing record, then yeah. The interesting thing about LSU, which does separate it some from other campuses that I've been at, is the students are, fairly welcoming to diverse ideas. There are those obviously with political agendas, and you can tell who they are very quickly. But it's not as bad as some campuses that I've been on. I'm from California, so I'm used to.
I'm from New York.
Same thing.
I get it.
It's very different down here. And I teach very, kind of like intense, hot issues. My specialty is in Middle East politics and terrorism and stuff like that. So like this last semester I taught the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And if I would have taught the same class on a campus in California, it would have been quite different.
A lot of people who spoke about college now, they give it a very bad name because how much it costs and how much and how little people get out of it when they leave. What is in your opinion, what's the point of college now versus what it should be?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question and an important one, considering considering the role that the federal government plays in sustaining college tuition now, et cetera. I think there's a big distinction that should be made between the scientific fields and the empirical fields, which are perhaps the best that they've ever been today. You're getting really excellent training in the hard sciences and the social sciences that stick with empirical research. Students are learning very good skills that they can take and apply to a whole range of professions, etc. The downside, though, I think, is a lot of students don't come in with the right advising, so they don't know which means they should take to a certain end. I tell my students, first off, you need to set outcome goals for yourself. What are the goals that you want to achieve within the next 10 years? And then find a degree or a program that's going to set you on the path to getting that. That's what's really missing is good advising, in my opinion.
Do you think too many kids go to college for the experience and not the learning?
I think almost everyone, at least in the generation after mine, is told that they have to go to college, and if they don't go to college, then there's something wrong with them, and just go jump through the hoop and check it off the list. That's not the right reason to go to college, obviously. And there's symptoms of this everyone needs to go to college, conception. And the symptoms of that are you have people there who aren't really interested in the exchange of ideas and learning something new, but just spouting off their own ideology, etc. And that perhaps speaks to the increased intensity of these very bizarre things like we demand safe spaces and microaggression. I don't even know what that is. Like if you don't pronounce someone's name properly, now you're being microaggressive.
You said in your speech that you believe in anarchy by praxis. What does that mean?
All right, so this, I borrow tidbits from different thinkers and stuff. There's a really great professor of political science at Yale, James A. Scott, and he kind of developed this idea over a number of years about thinking about anarchy, and the idea is that it's not the typical we want anarchy as outcome where there's this chaos and whatever, and not that anarchy equates chaos, as Alexander Went says properly. Anarchy is what you make of it, but that's a whole other conversation. Anarchy as praxis is this idea of not allowing the bureaucracy to take over. Bureaucrats, in my mind, are those who are obsessed with preserving certain means and functions rather than focusing on the outcome that some collective has decided is what is desired. And anarchy as praxis is being in a thorn of the side of the sticklers who say, oh, well, we have to do this just because, without any really politically meaningful purpose. I've never seen myself as a teacher. I've always seen myself as an empirical researcher, as a scientist who goes and teaches a couple times a week. But I think I do have a very unorthodox teaching style, which is attractive to the youth. It's non-restrictive. Like I forbid hand raising in the class. I say just talk. Maybe I introduce a bit of anarchy into the classroom itself. I like a free exchange of ideas in the class. I always tell people, if you disagree with me on something, call me out on it. Tell me why I'm wrong. Point to the facts. I'm a fact-based teacher, so if someone comes in the class spouting ideology or propaganda, I don't let them continue. I say, you don't have any facts to back that up. Let's pull out Let's pull up the computers and Google it if we want, and look at the sources that you're relying on. A number of my classes dealing with Middle East politics is us together collectively looking up the origins of the claims of various students, or myself when students say, I want to know what the origin of this claim is, we look it up. So it's a perhaps a very unorthodox way of teaching, but I think it connects with a large percentage of the student body.
Did you have a professor in your life that you studied that inspired you to have this method? And what was the best compliment a student ever gave you from this?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, I've had a lot of mentors over the years at various universities. Um, there's a fantastic professor at Claremont named Mark Abdolian, and he kind of has this free flowing type of way of teaching, very empirical based as well. I've perhaps modeled myself off of him the most. I'm sure we disagree in terms of our own political ideologies and whatnot, but in terms of teaching style, I'd say that that's probably the model that I've used the most. Um, the best comment, the best compliment a student has ever given me was, "You should be a Prada or Armani model on the runway in New York."